A change of pace. Samsung's new 200 megapixel camera in its latest flagship phone sounds impressive, but will it really make our photos any better? To find out, let's make it happen with Image Matrix tech editor and ace photographer himself, Mr. Djuro. Djuro, what's your verdict on the S23 Ultra?
Tim, good morning to you. 200 megapixels inside this camera is an astounding feat of engineering. And only yesterday I had a chance to go out and do some testing, and I'm going to share those results with you. So I'm just out near Darling Harbour yesterday, looking back towards Barangaroo. And as you can see here, 200 megapixels. What does that mean? It means you've got really tiny megapixels, 0.6 micrometers. And you can see as I zoom in, I can keep zooming in, great detail. But the light's really good there, and you expect that. So with 200 megapixels, you can have a big broad canvas. Now, you're seeing here pixels being joined together. And by joining together, you can make them bigger. And look at this. You can do things like in dark conditions, have great lighting, no matter how dark it is. So you can increase the size of the pixels and get results like this. They have taken a hit with the selfie camera down to about 16 megapixels, down from 40 megapixels, but it's a great result. But as you can see here too, you can do all this other stuff with night photography. Nightography, that's what they're calling it, and things like astrophotography. I know Steve Fennick's pretty keen about this, but look at this, Tim. You can see the stars and the constellations as you're testing it. So I haven't had enough time to go through all that, but you add all these things up, and this becomes a really compelling product with its photography, particularly at night. So that's just in the backyard, and you can't go wrong. You can follow these constellations. Now, 8K video. It's now 30 frames a second. And I've got to say, it's pretty good. At 24 frames a second last time around, it was great. But the detail in this camera at 200 megapixels is extraordinary. But don't forget, it starts at 200 megapixels. You're really taking photos that are less than that down to about 12 megapixels because it brings those pixels together in groups, Tim, to make them bigger. So you start at 200, they go to 50, or they go to 12. So if you understand that in the photo taking process, you don't end up with these massive files each time. You can if you want to, or you can do the smaller files, which are better in low light in other circumstances. But it is an extraordinary camera, and don't forget, it's got a really long lens as well.
Look, putting it in layman's terms, let's talk about the video element of the camera. We always chatted, in TV terms, you and I have been doing this for 3 decades, about, broadcast quality. What are we talking about here with these cameras in contrast to, say, cameras that shoot what we're doing today and general TV?
It's a really good question. The sensors on these things are very small, but they still do a pretty good job. With professional cameras, you're looking at a far greater colour gamut. They can record things that are more realistic and true to life at a higher frame rate, but they're getting pretty close. I was shooting some stuff at the Origin last year, Tim, with this camera, the previous camera, and everyone thought it was part of the broadcast. It was that good because of stability. So they're not yet up to what TV cameras can do for network television. But, gee, they're pretty close. And the fact you can throw it in your pocket, Tim, is amazing. But it's that lens, the reach and the stability that makes this camera really, really good.
Is it enough to get iPhone users to switch, do you think?
Great question, and I get asked this all the time. And I think the iPhone is still a pretty good phone, especially the 14 Pro Max. And I think if you're already an Apple, there's no real change unless you want a longer lens, so kids playing sport or doing things at school like play, so you can see them with a big optical zoom, or you're looking at other things like gaming and that. It's really great for gaming. So I think if you're on the Android side, this is a compelling product.
Tell us a little bit more about the AI chatbot, ChatGPT or ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, it's extraordinary. I said about a month ago that this is going to be the story of the year about AI, Tim, and it will be, because what's happened here is that there's been a few supposed leaks online where people have seen that ChatGPT, the online, I guess it's a chatbot that can do anything for you. I mean, I got it to write an AC/DC song for me the other day, and it actually did a pretty good job. But Tim, what's happened here is that it's going to be integrated in search, and that means the pressure's on Google. Now, Google has its own, it's called Lambda, and they're having a launch later in the week, actually, in Paris, so they might compete with it. And it has all this natural language, but they've sort of held back and implementing it in search because it can be some risk. You know, if it gets it wrong, it can be pretty embarrassing and pretty offensive if they do that. But what we've seen in the last couple of days from OpenAI, which is the brains behind the Chat GPT, and Microsoft, a huge investor, is that apparently and we've seen some shots here, these shots aren't 100% verified, but they're telling us that they've leaked it online. So Bing, which is Microsoft's search engine, it looks like they're ready to go. So when you go and search, you'll be interacting with Chat GPT, and that means your whole search is going to be more conversational, and that means the pressure's on Google, but they're ready to go as well. But we'll have more news on Google midweek, Tim. So the search is really going to change this year. It's going to be talking to something that's something like HAL from 2001. Maybe not as mean.
Okay, I look forward to that. And the world's biggest plane to live on virtually after being destroyed in real life. Are we talking about the Spruce Goose here?
No, not quite the Spruce Goose. I didn't think it got too much off the ground, Tim, back in the day. But I'll talk about the AN-225, which is the Great Antonov. What you're looking at here is that after it was destroyed in Ukraine, the Russian invasion over there, sadly a year ago, this is being built into Microsoft Flight Simulator. And we've seen it before on this segment, Tim, how realistic it is. Well, they've rebuilt the entire plane virtually. So it is going to fly again, Tim, and it'll be available for everyone to have a go at. And it's got all the switches, that sort of stuff. This plane was enormous. It really was a technical tragedy over and above the human tragedy. This is one of the examples of a one-off plane that is so loved around the world by aviation geeks, and it could carry an amazing amount of cargo. And it's got the two wheels at the front. It's so heavy that it needs more wheels so it doesn't crush the runways around the world. Now, the great thing is, when you get an update to this, Tim, and it's about $20, the profits will go to the Antonov company to hopefully help rebuild another AN-225, so it might fly again for real. They're hopefully doing that in secret to do that. But in the meantime, on your Xbox or on your PC, you'll soon be able to fly this wonderful machine, the Antonov 225. What a great plane.
How much bigger was it than your average A380?
Yeah, it's funny. It's the A380 looks like it's pretty big, but this thing is just like chunky. It's really, really chunky. It's a couple of stories high, and I think it's a pretty good tussle, but it is significantly bigger when it comes to carrying load. It's an amazing aircraft.
Just quickly on sport now, you worked quite a bit with Eddie Jones. We've got the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup coming up later this year. How do you think that the new Wallabies will go? You actually were part of the Wallaby setup as the General Manager of Media. Eddie Jones back in after 2005.
Yeah, Eddie Jones was great for me. When I was the Wallabies media manager in the 2003 World Cup, I introduced a lot of technology to the Wallabies, so it goes back a long way for me, technology, and Eddie was great with that. And he'll use that to help sort things out. He's an old school guy as well, but I think he's got the laser focus. I spoke to him last year, Tim, and I asked him, I said, are you going to come back? And he's pretty much indicated to me, they've got to be serious about it. They've got to be serious about it. So clearly they are. And what that said to me, Tim, is that, all right, Eddie's going to drive this, and he's already saying the right things from grassroots up the Wallabies. He knows the deal. And already they're on the back pages, Tim. How long's that been? So, Tim, Eddie can drive the enthusiasm, and what's in his favour is the short amount of time, because there's no time to mess around. He's really good at getting things changed quickly, and I'll tell you what, mate, if they thought they trained hard before, look out. Eddie is going to be cracking the whip, but it's so good to have him around. He is a legend.
Yeah, the sandhills, here they come. Yeah, and wouldn't it be great if we could make it deep into the World Cup a bit later on in the year? It's always good to chat, Djuro.